I'm Mike Boris, and this is Straight Talk. I'm about to do a podcast with Anthony Miller. He's the CEO of the Westpac Group, which encompasses a lot of banks. I should make an initial disclosure. The disclosure is that my company, Yellow Brick Road Group, of which I'm the chairman of the major shareholder, has a relationship with Westpac. They are a warehouse provider to us in relation to our own product with our global partner, which is Magnetar, through a business called Resi Home Loans, or the Resi product. So that's a disclosure I need to make. And I also will happily disclose that I've been, maybe 40-year customer of St. George Bank, right back from the days it was Building Society, right through today. It's now sitting under the Westpac Group, still as a bank, but using the Westpac Group's banking license. So that's my disclosure. Other than that, I have no relationship with Anthony. I have met him on a couple of occasions before, but in his capacity as the CEO of a bank. So look forward to this podcast. It's pretty exciting. Pretty cool to actually be able to interview a CEO of one of the 4 big banks in Australia, and from my point of view, one of my favourite banks. Anthony Miller, welcome to Straight Talk, mate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This is pretty unusual. I find it as quite an exciting opportunity to sit in front of someone who's a CEO of one of the largest banks in this country. And of course, for our audience, Australian banks are some of the most profitable banks in the world by virtue of market capitalisation, if you're relative to that. And maybe they don't make the biggest profits in the world, but they, in a relative sense, they are some of the most profitable banks in the world, and definitely some of the highest rated banks in the world. Yeah. And you're sitting at the helm of Westpac.
Absolutely. And I've been in the role 216 days, Mark. So I'm
216 days.
Enjoyed every single day so far.
It's pretty amazing. I understand you come from a fairly humble background. Maybe you can just tell me, where's Anthony Miller come from? Well, where were you born? What's the deal?
So I was born in Canberra, and for various reasons we moved around a lot as I grew up. So I lived in Canberra, Darwin, Alice Springs, Dubbo, Canberra, Brisbane, and I finished high school in Brisbane. My last 2 years of high school were in Brisbane. And so often people think I'm a Queenslander, and I suppose 2 years of high school and 5 years of uni, sort of formative years, and certainly have a lot of affection for Queensland. But I spent a lot of time outside Queensland growing up.
Well, under the state of origin rules, that doesn't qualify you as a Queenslander, or does it?
Not quite. The way it broke down is that when state of origin first came on in 1980, I lived in New South Wales, Dubbo, and I was mad keen rugby league supporter, and it was seared in my memory that the frustrations that Queensland just kept beating us for those first 4 or 5 years until Steve.
Well, they did have Arthur Beaton, but
that's right, and they had some grades, Wally Lewis and Mal Meninga, my goodness, at his prime. So it was almost impossible to win, and so therefore I'm a little bit partial to seeing New South Wales compete in state of origin.
You've got a blue shirt on.
Yes, that's right. But I'm a bit of a fan of the Queensland Reds rugby team because I had the privilege of going to school, and people like John Eales and guys like Mark Connors that I knew from uni all played for the Reds. So I follow the Reds pretty closely. So I'm sort of a little bit of an each way bet there, Mark.
No. Come on. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. Which NRL team do you follow?
Parramatta Eels.
The Eels.
And I've been with the Parramatta Eels since 1975, when my dad sat me down and said, you can go for any team you want as long as it's the Eels.
That's fairly democratic.
And then I was spoiled because in 76 they made the grand final, and then it just felt like, for me, until I was about 17, that every year the Parramatta Eels were either in a grand final or just missed out on a grand final or won a grand final. And then since then, it's been pretty barren.
And in terms of your family, brothers, sisters, what's the deal?
So I'm the eldest of 6.
6 kids.
6 kids, yeah. So myself, then my 2 sisters, and then 3 youngest, 3 boys.
6 kids, wow.
Yeah. I was a really, I had a really lucky, really good upbringing. A great family, mum and dad, still going really strong.
Oh, they're still alive?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, that's
still going strong.
Fantastic.
We celebrated Dad's 80th a couple of weeks ago. They've got 6 kids, and they've got 23 grandchildren and 1 great grandchild.
Wow.
And all fit, healthy, all good people going after life in the right way.
You have in your family, as I understand it, either 1 or 2 brothers who were fairly decent with using their hands.
Yeah, so one of my brothers, Paul, was a great boxer. He represented Australia at the Sydney 2000 Olympics, and Manchester Commonwealth Games, and he won a gold medal as super middleweight in 2002. So he was a very good boxer. All my brothers, they can handle themselves pretty well.
The younger brothers.
That's right, yeah. So I've got to stay humble when I'm at home. And then one of my sisters, or both my sisters, were great sports persons, and one of them won a gold medal at the Sydney Olympics in water polo.
Really?
Yeah. So they left me nothing in the gene cupboard in terms of, they just, all of them super talented at sport and achieved so much.
Did you play sport?
Yeah, I was a really enthusiastic swimmer. Really
A
enthusiastic.
swimmer?
And I played all my sort of sports at young, football and AFL, rugby league, rugby union. I was really committed to being a swimmer, and trained twice a day. I was trained with Joe King at Leander in Brisbane. Hayley Lewis was one of the, so
She was in the squad.
she was in the squad. Yeah, she was a terrific swimmer and obviously represented Australia. I wanted to represent Australia, I just wasn't good enough. But
Because a lot of swimmers end up playing water polo.
yeah.
Is that how your sisters got on water polo?
I think a little bit of the influence was that we were a mad, keen swimming family, and so at the pool and good swimmers. I think Gail, my sister who was a water polo player, she could have been a champion swimmer, could have been a champion any sport. She was just such a natural athlete, and such a capable, hard-working, training kind of person. So any sport she chose, I think she probably would have succeeded in.
As a parent myself of a swimmer who was like one of my sons was an elite swimmer, one of the things I learned is about swimmers is that there's a massive amount of commitment to the craft.
Yeah.
And also for the parents, for that matter too. What do you think you've learned in a character sense from being a swimmer, but more importantly, watching your parents adopt or adapt into the commitment of having a son who wanted to be a swimmer?
Yeah, great question. I mean, in terms of swimming, I'm forever grateful that I was very committed to it. And also, the fact that I didn't get there, I have no regrets because I trained really hard. I just wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
But I got so much out of it in terms of friends, but also fitness, and also just I knew how to set a goal and how to relentlessly go after it.
Maybe you could explain that a little bit, because most people probably haven't been swimmers or haven't had the experience of it. So your summer holidays was committed to training.
Absolutely.
When all your mates were doing.
So I swam all year round.
Yep.
I swam all year round, but
the trials were in end of January.
That's exactly right. So through summer holidays, 5 a.m. in the water, finished session 7:30 in the morning. Wouldn't do much during the day. Then I'd train in the afternoon. And I'd be swimming anywhere between sort of 10 to 14 kilometres a day when I was really going for it.
Can I ask you what was your stroke? What were you doing?
Look, breaststroke. I wanted to, I was competitive as a breaststroker. Tried pretty hard at individual medley as well. But breaststroke was my main sport, particularly main stroke.
And then you would swim at minimum 6 days a week?
That's right. It'd be twice a day, every day, and then Saturday once.
Saturday. So, which means when you were 15, 16, your mates are just starting to go to movies or whatever together, and you can't do that sort of stuff because you're getting up at 4 o'clock.
Exactly right.
So you have to give a fair bit up.
Yeah.
Is it because you're the sort of personality is that you were compliant because I got 4 sons. Only one who was any good at this was the most compliant son.
Yeah.
In other words, he never challenged me. Come on, mate, get up. We've got to go. Was it because you were a compliant kid, or was it because you were a driven kid, or both?
Well, look, I think I was compliant. I suppose I like to think I was a good boy, but I was driven.
Yeah,
I was very focused on. I had a goal.
Yeah,
I wanted to represent Australia. I trained twice a day. I trained really hard. In some ways, I didn't train smart. I trained hard and without sort of nuance and, giving the right things like rest and recovery the right weight that it deserved. But that was back in the, mid to late 80s where everyone thought you just put the miles in and you'll get there.
Were you keeping logbooks in those days?
I kept a bit of a log of, the sessions, but I didn't keep copious notes.
Right, you weren't doing pulse rates and stuff like that.
Oh no, we were doing
Yeah.
that in training sessions, and there was a lot more science coming into, if you will, coaching and swimming training then, and the Institute of Sport have been a big contributor to that sort of delivery of science into it. But I was, very focused on just on the training, and I enjoyed the training. To be honest with you, that was, it's quite social,
Yeah, it is. You think
and
not, but at the end of a 1500, you have a
exactly
little
right.
bit of a chat.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And then look, I'm at an all boys school, and then at swimming training, there's lots of girls. So that
Ah,
was
yeah,
also
that's true.
a little bit of a wow. This is a bit of an interesting dynamic.
So, what do you? I mean, I often ask my son, but he'll tell me this. But what do you think you might have gained in terms of character or your character from putting in many kilometres in the pool, many early mornings, making lots of sacrifices? Well, maybe they weren't sacrifices, but when you look back in hindsight, you had to make a call. What do you think you might have gained in terms of your character today in what you do at the bank, for example? And I don't mean anything specific, but
Yeah.
how did that shape Anthony Miller today? What
So I
effect?
think, yeah, how would I? Yeah, that's again, a good challenge. Certainly, the idea that you've just got to sometimes go through a lot of hard work to get the gain, and that there's going to be periods of time where it's just a real grind, and that there's not the sugarcoat of every day and everything's positive always, because you're just in the middle of hard work, training hard. You're foregoing going out with your friends because you want to be able to train at your best the next day. But then there's great rewards at the end of it. And then equally, the thing I enjoyed, I really liked training. I liked the sense of, putting 100% in and just feeling like you've exhausted yourself. And maybe it's perverse, but I took satisfaction out of being a really hard trainer, and took great pride in that I was, one of the better trainers in the team. And then one of the things I did learn was, it's all very well to be good and hard training, but at that moment when you have to stand on the block and compete in the race, you've got to have your head in the game. You've got to be in that moment ready to deliver. And that's one of the other great challenges of swimming, is that you can train for 6 months through summer, and then you've got 2.5 minutes to win, and your entire summer's defined by 2.5 minutes in the last race of the
Well, it could be a
season.
hundredth of a second.
Exactly right. And if you don't get everything perfectly right in the race, someone can beat you. And so, you have to be so focused on, am I doing it all? Am I doing it all right? Am I getting it all done? And so that sort of constant challenge of, is this right? Am I really pushing myself as I should? Have I done everything as I should? That constant challenge you impose on yourself is sort of like a skill that's really helpful later on in whatever you decide to do. So I sort of feel like swimming, that I was pretty privileged to be able to be a swimmer. I thought it really did give me a lot of opportunities, and also the fitness and health consequences of just being able to swim 10 to 14 kilometers a day sets you up for life.
I think that's
Yeah.
right in a health sense. And I think also you've got to have at least one parent who's completely committed to
Yeah.
that process for the kid, because it's actually quite. It's, when I look back, it's all encompassing. Being a parent
Yeah.
of a swimmer.
Yeah.
In the end, for me, like, I was happy to get my kid a car and give him when he got his license, so he could at
Yeah.
least get himself at training at 4:30 in the morning. But if I then say to you today, in terms of your job as CEO of the bank, and by the way, Westpac sits on a number of banks. Well, they're not. There's not a number of banks, but there's a number of brands.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
you've got St George,
That's right.
your Bank SA. Is it Bank SA?
That's right. Bank
Bank of
SA
Melbourne,
and Bank of Melbourne.
and anyone else?
And so, in terms of bank or bank-like offerings, Rams also
Rams,
has
yeah,
its own system as
yeah.
well. So,
So
what really Westpac is an amalgam of different banks sitting under the one group that is Westpac Group,
yeah,
and so it's really actually a collection of banks
yeah,
within the group.
yeah, and they all talk to different customers, and they talk to different emotions from different sorts of customers. Like Bank of Melbourne is very Melbourne.
Yes.
St George is sort of not so much Melbourne, it's Sydney, more Sydney than anything else, I think, like
Yeah.
traditionally, because
Yeah.
I remember St George, but I was a customer of St George Building Society.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And
Yes.
I
Yeah.
went through and then St George Building Society merged with another credit union or building society. I can't remember who it
Yeah.
was. And then ultimately it became St George Bank, and then St George Bank was taken over under Gail Kelly by Westpac,
That's
or
correct.
taken
Yes.
control by Westpac.
Yes.
And now, as a result of that, I'm now with Westpac, but I'm still with St George, but I know it's sitting under the Westpac brand.
Yeah.
And as someone sitting on top of it's a large group.
Yes.
Would you say that the event of swimming, lots of other things happen in your life, we'll talk about that in a moment, but do they build resilience for you? Because, like, as a bank boss, I can't imagine. I think you'd be putting out bushfires a lot. I mean, there'd be a lot of dramas. I mean, like within the bank, or maybe didn't you come? You came in after Westpac's major drama, the drama that sort of occurred during after 2019. 2019, I think it
Yeah,
was.
no, certainly. I joined Westpac at the end of 2020, and that was just in that sort of a difficult 12 months where, there was obviously infractions under the money laundering and
Yeah.
AUSTRAC matter. And then there was quite a bit of work that Westpac as a group had to do, which was, fix and remediate processes. And so for a few years there, it was very much focused on getting its house in order.
We're doing your 1500s,
That's exactly right. And so that's just hard work.
just grinding away,
That's right.
grinding
And
away.
more importantly, it's just getting back to the basics and making sure the way we deliver products and service to customers were done at a standard that met community and regulatory expectations. And so, the bank did a lot of work on that. And that was also, while challenging, also quite enjoyable in the sense of just, as a leadership team, all of us at the time just very focused on how do we just get Westpac, the group, back to where it should be, which is, a really good bank, performing well and delivering for customers
And
and for
shareholders.
shareholders.
Yeah,
That's
then
right.
which, by the way, I'll come back to the customer shareholder thing because that's a hard one to balance.
Yeah.
Well, there's a balance, but it's a difficult one. I want to talk to you about how you do that.
Yeah.
If I just go back to, so you left school, and what did you do?
So I finished school in '87, and I went to university, and I did a degree at the time, which was a little bit unusual. And you might remember the late '80s. Japan was the second largest economy in the world. It had just come out of nowhere through the '70s and
Yeah,
'80s. And Japan was buying everything in Queensland. It just felt like
totally.
every tourist
Kuma go gumi.
mine. Exactly right. So
They were the
everything.
massive developer. They owned everything in
Yes.
Sydney as well.
Okay. Yeah. Well, certainly in Queensland. And so when I finished school, I suppose my father had studied law, so I was a little bit drawn to I'll study law. But I decided to do an arts law degree, and it was the first time it had been offered. There was only 11 of us in the first class, and it was a combination of Asian studies, majoring in Japanese language and some other
That's the art
subjects.
side of it.
That's the arts side of it, plus a law degree. And the law degree was at QUT,
Yep.
and the arts or Asian studies degree was at Griffith University. So the two universities had combined. And so to be sort of like Monday at QUT, Tuesday at Griffith, or vice versa.
And they were physical in those days
That's
too.
exactly right. Quite two different campuses, one in the city, one out at sort of Mount Gravatt. So that was a really interesting combination. And so I went after that. And my intention was when I finished that degree that I'd probably go and pursue, what I'd call like a career, perhaps working in Japan, or I'd go and study further in Japan. And as it turned out, that didn't eventuate.
Did you learn to speak Japanese?
I studied Japanese. That's right. I would say my Japanese is poor. One of the challenges is that once you study languages, you've got to go and live and immerse yourself
Yeah.
in the culture. And I didn't get to do that straight after university, and so missed my window to really cement the language. But then, as it turns out, through my career later on, I was in Japan a lot for business. Really enjoyed working in Japan, and I had teams reporting to me out of Japan. So I've had a lot of exposure to Japan over the course of the last 30 years.
So did you ever practice as a lawyer?
So I did. I finished university, and I was a bit unsure about where I was going to go. And I was actually playing a little bit of rugby at Brothers Rugby Club in
Oh
Brisbane,
yeah.
and a guy called Paul Tully and another guy who was working at the law firm Grant Dearlove encouraged me to join their law firm. So I joined their law firm for a couple of years, which was great because I was sort of unsure about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And they gave me an opportunity just to work for a couple of years, qualify as a lawyer. And I did that, and that was great times.
As a young lawyer, I guess you just again put your swimming hat on, and you just have to grind away, do 16 hours a day,
Yeah.
get paid crappy money. Do they do college law in Queensland? How does it work?
No, you could do that, but back then it was an article clerk.
You had to
And
become
so,
an article
yeah,
clerk.
you're an article clerk,
You're at the
and so you're
bottom
at
of
the
the
bottom of the food chain.
yeah.
And in some ways, that was also, in hindsight, a great thing because I had to do lots of menial jobs as well as potentially some of the more interesting legal. And so you just get into work and you start from scratch and you just work. And the idea of just having to do hard work and eventually things will come your way was sort of like, well, okay, I understood that. I grew up on that premise. And so I really enjoyed it, and I got a lot out of that. And then what had happened was, they were very good to me, and I was enjoying what I was doing there. And I got married, and had a wonderful, had a first baby very, very early. And I sort of sat back and thought, do I want to be as a lawyer in Brisbane now? Is this why I studied arts law? Is this what I thought I was going to do? And the answer was actually no. I think I want to go and look out for more and try something else. And so, as a result of that decision, I applied for a job, and I got a job here in Sydney with Mallisons,
The big law
the
firm.
big law firm, and that was very gracious of them to give me a chance. And I went from sort of a small suburban, small, highly specialised firm in Brisbane, that's really actually blossomed since that time, to Mallisons, very large firm in Sydney, and I was put into the banking and finance practice, which I hadn't worked in before. And I was assigned to a team, and the partner who I worked for, he was really tough, but he was really good for me in the sense that,
Tough in what way?
well, he was just so demanding and exacting in terms of accuracy and detail and work. And I think that was really good for me because it just set a bar immediately. You've got to be at this standard if you're going to prosper in this place. And that was great. And I just put my head down, and I just worked my way through that.
Again, swam.
Yeah, and I
Just
just
kept
got
going.
and I just and by and after a period of time, excuse me, he was incredibly gracious and generous to me, allowing me to do more and more, and gave me a lot more run of the place. And I saw some magnificent, partners who I was just so impressed with how they handled and conducted themselves. It just really lifted me up and asked me to, think about the kind of person I want to be, the kind of professional I want to be, and the standard I need to set myself. And so I got a lot out of that. And in working at that law firm, I had some exposure to various banks, and then eventually I moved to one of those banks, and that's
So,
how I went from law into finance,
so
effectively.
a lot of people don't realise though that there are in those big law firms like Mallisons. I mean, most of them think of it as a bit of a factory, but just correct me if I'm wrong. We're talking about the early '90s,
This was 96. I came to
'96.
Sydney. End of 96, I came to Sydney.
So a firm like Mallisons, they'd probably already merged with Stephen Jakes at that
There was
stage.
Malcolm Stephen
Yeah,
Jarvis. That's
and
right. Yeah.
they're now something else. But
Yeah. Kingwood.
but they got so big,
Mm.
relatively speaking, at the time. It was the market was dominated by them and two or three other law firms
Yeah.
in terms of size. I'm talking about, and they got all
Yeah.
the big jobs,
Yes.
the big banks,
That's right.
the big work. Um, you would have been in one of the big four law firms. Does that somehow inform you as to, or does that somehow shape you as to your future career? That you end up in one of the big four banks. You were you were at the big investment banks too, but prior to that, or the
That's
big
right. Yeah.
foreign banks who were
Yeah.
very active here in Australia.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in a second. Do you think that has some impact on your career path? Did you say to yourself, "Look, I've always been I've experienced at a big law firm. I've now been experienced at the big non-retail banks here in Australia, and well, let's call them out. It was Deutsche Bank and who else?
Goldman Sachs.
Goldman Sachs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So globally, two of the biggest banks, particularly Deutsche in the US, and in terms of certain areas, anyway. Did that start to make you think this is the sorts of environments I've got to stick to, or did you ever think to yourself, wouldn't mind going back to a small local law firm like the one in Brisbane?
Oh no. So when I got to Mallisons, and I really enjoyed my time there, and I really enjoyed as I got to do more, and I really
What was it you enjoyed though about it?
um well, they're all high quality people, and who were every day, going hard at it.
Your
And
colleagues or the
or
above you?
colleagues above and below and
Yeah,
around. So it was a very sort of perform kind of
yeah,
environment.
yeah.
And it was really interesting and, big end of town kind of work. So it was quite, for a young, impressionable guy from Brisbane, it was like, wow, look
One
at
of
this. This
six.
is, yeah, this is exciting. And so I really enjoyed it. Um, it, it was also the case that I never really had any plans. I sort of, oh, that's really good. I'm going to try that. And I ended up going into finance, for example, by accident. I didn't start with that initiative, but then I had a conversation with Credit Suisse, and they said, oh, why don't you, we're looking for a lawyer. Why don't you join us? And I joined as an in-house lawyer, and then I moved into banking quickly thereafter. And it was because they said, "Oh, why don't you try this?" And I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll try that." I was never sitting back and saying, "Here's my plan. I'm going to work in a big four law firm, then I'm going to move into a big investment bank." And then I just never had it mapped out in my head. And in some respects, I was just enjoying
You play what
working.
was in front of you.
Exactly right, and I really enjoyed the people and working and the intensity required. And then as I got into that, and you're competing hard to perform and deliver, people then graciously and generously give you opportunities, or at least I was lucky in that respect. And so that's how my career developed, which was without design. It was just it developed as a result of just people giving me a chance at things, and I decided, yeah, I'll try that, and I'll try that, and so
It's funny you should say this because I wondered to myself, is Anthony Miller's propensity and preparedness to work hard and work with intensity and all those things you're talking about then, is that something that was socially formed on him by putting him through swimming regimes, or is that something that his personality always was going to do? And when he ended up going to work, he was actually had the propensity and the preparedness to do it.
I think there was three forces. One is definitely swimming,
The
training,
experience of that.
experience in it.
I
Secondly,
know
I
I can
think
do it.
exactly, and then I think I was a little bit built that way. And then thirdly, my parents worked. They worked hard. They put 100% in, and it was never. It was always clear to me. It was always clear to all my brothers and sisters that mum and dad were working really hard, and they worked really hard to make sure we had opportunities. And there was no way I was ever going to let them down by not having 100% effort into whatever we did, or whatever goal or whatever opportunity was given to me. I was always going to give it 100% and do whatever it took. And it's sort of like almost I felt an obligation to make sure that if I was going to do something, I was going to do it really well, because how could I look mum and dad in the eye and not have put 100% into something?
Like a sense of duty.
A sense of duty, a sense of obligation, but that's only because they worked so hard, and we didn't have a lot, but we wanted for nothing when we were growing up. And I'm the eldest of six kids, and everyone was given a real good school. Everyone was given any sport opportunity they wanted to pursue, they could. And you got swimmers, footballers,
Boxes.
boxers, water polo players, any sport anywhere. Mum and dad would take whoever it was to that sport and then back them 100%. And so I think we all felt an obligation to, work hard and take every opportunity and give it 100%. So I think there's three forces. I think the swimming, definitely think a little bit of my own personality and DNA, and then clearly that obligation or responsibility to mum and dad.
Do you have any memories of any one particular individual who was a great mentor to you outside of your parents at work? In either law firm or Credit Suisse or Goldman Sachs or a Deutsche, was there someone who sort of took you under their wing and said, I'm going to try and help this kid along?
Yeah, look, I think I was I was lucky in particularly in my career, that there's been a few people who took some interest in me and just gave me a little bit of extra coaching and insights. And there was I was working for one partner at Mallison's, a guy called Mclachlan, who was very good to me, and he was really really fixated on accuracy and detail, and that helped me improve. And I improved a lot as a professional and as an individual. And there was another partner in the law firm who had a big impact on me, and he probably didn't realize it. And I did catch up with him on a few occasions after I'd left the law firm and shared this with him. And he passed away only a couple of years ago. And his name was John Stumbles, and he was the sort of senior partner in the banking and finance practice. And he was such a nice, decent guy, incredibly thoughtful and compassionate and incredibly driven, and but just so classy. And I just, every time I saw him in action and every time he spoke, I thought, gee, this guy's so impressive. And then he started to just give me a little bit of coaching and a little bit of encouragement, and he'd sort of pull me inside and say, look, as you're doing this work, I'd be, think about this as you deliver yourself into that meeting, Anthony, or be mindful of the fact that this is what people will be looking for. And so I was very grateful for that coaching from a guy who I had put on a pedestal, because he was just so classy and so good at what he did. So I was lucky there. And then when I joined Goldman's, there was a couple of people there who, again, it's a high intensity, high performance environment. And a couple of people took the time out to give me feedback and sort of highlight what my strength is or what my weakness is and what I should work on. And so I was very grateful for that.
That's interesting. You should say that, particularly that as a younger man in a law firm, impressed with somebody's, let's call it, kindness and gentleness. Because generally speaking, the sort of more maybe it's incorrect, but the more accepted proposition of someone who's very, very successful in an organization, like a big firm, is that you have to be a bit of a bugger to get up there. Like you have to be
Yeah.
tough and mean and all those sorts of things. When someone like you says that they were impressed as a younger man with someone who actually displayed good qualities, kindness, gentleness, but also constructive criticism,
Mm.
how much of that have you taken away from that and put into yourself in
Oh, well,
relation to what you do now?
yeah, so that's again a good sort of challenge. Uh, I'm incredibly driven, I think.
In the business today?
That's right. I'm very competitive. I want to win,
Hmm.
but I don't want to win unfairly. I don't want to have an unfair advantage and win. I want everyone to have the same opportunity competing in a race. It's no good if you're um, given every advantage and the others have no such chance to compete. It's not really a race, is
You're
it? You're
talking
not.
about internally now?
That's internally.
Yep.
That's externally. But competing. Um, I do enjoy competing and I do enjoy winning. But equally, if I've tried my best and I wasn't good enough, then so be it. And so therefore, you know, you can and should be able to be an effective executive and an effective leader, and things like making sure everyone is fairly treated, making sure everyone is heard, um, going out of your way to help someone who's a little bit less fortunate in opportunities in the office or opportunities where it might be, seems to me to be like something that absolutely should be allowed and should be endorsed and should be accepted. And that doesn't mean you can't be, compassionate, which I think, is really important. A really important virtue is to be compassionate, but compassionate and thoughtful, but also really demanding of yourself, and then also able to then say to other people, well, let's lift your standard. And asking someone to lift their standard is not unfair, inappropriate. If you're a person who's, thoughtful, compassionate, understanding,
And prepared to do the same
and
themselves.
prepared to do the same. And so I suppose
So is that leadership by example?
I think it's a little bit of that. Yeah, I think also, when I think about leadership and what I have to do at the bank, there's an element of leadership, and we're going in this direction. Equally, as a leader, I've also got a responsibility to make sure people have the best opportunity to improve and develop and grow. And so, leadership's a little bit of service as well. It's not, as a leader, that's your reward and look at you and everyone needs to do what you say. But actually, no, I'm a leader, and my job is to then help everyone prosper, everyone progress, everyone improve. And so I think that sort of leadership where it's anchored around, look at this dominant personality and look at how successful they are. And there's this idea that they're a bit of a bugger and they're a bit hard nosed. No, I'm not interested in that. I'm much more focused on that leader who, well, we're here to deliver, we're going to win, but we're going to do it together. And what can I do to help you to contribute to where we've got to get to as a team? So that's how I think about it. That's how I try and balance it.
We often say, I mean, and you would remember this from when your brother was boxing, styles win fights. So you in a long version, then you try to describe your style. But let's say as a leader, um, how would you describe it in a shorter version? Like how would you describe yourself as a leader? Therefore, as a leader, like the way you lead the bank, because how many staff you got? Like how many people in the
So
group?
we've got just under 38,000
Okay,
people
so
within the group at the
okay, so
moment. Yeah.
you're not sort of looking at
Yeah.
the let's call it the latest people have been employed in the last 800 or something, and you're not sort of talking to each one of them. That's impossible.
Yeah.
So you've got to build leadership teams as well
Yeah.
below you.
Yeah.
So do you build leadership teams as a leader that follow your style of leadership, or I mean, do you sort of self-select, or do people self-select based on you? Or do you pick people in your own image as a leader?
Good question. I think it's all a little bit of all of the above, if I can answer it that way, which is, what I'm very focused on at Westpac, and what's really important to me is I want a team, a leadership team, because I think a great team is always going to be so much more successful. So what I'm really focused on is an executive team who have great teamwork, have each other's backs, are clear on what we collectively are going after, where we want to take this bank. What I've also been focused on, for example, as I've brought people into the executive team, is making sure that other executives got an opportunity to meet and to interview those prospective
So not
candidates.
just your call.
That's exactly right. I want us to say, is this a team member we want part of our team who will commit and share with us both the challenge and the upside of what we want to go after? And so I've been very focused on that. And what's been very interesting to me is that, we've got a goal where we want to take Westpac, but equally, the executives who've joined us and who want to join us, and as we build this right across the bank, everyone wants to join a team. They want to be part of a team that is what we are focused on and what we're trying to create. And so that's been really, really invigorating and encouraging to see that kind of response.
Because, you have a limited pool where to choose your executive team out of. I mean, unless you bring him in from overseas, perhaps you are. But let's say we're just looking at the Australian landscape, and the people who are available for a spot that you need to fill, based on what you want your leadership team to look like. Sometimes you have to go and see who's out there in the marketplace. Like we do in rugby league all the time with the Roosters. We're always finding, who's someone who fits into our system.
Yeah.
But because someone could be a great player,
Mm.
have all the talent in the world for a particular spot, position. It could be centre, wing, whatever. But unless they fit into our system, we won't employ. And our system has a lot to do with character, style, etc. Is that something that you get an opportunity to do at a bank like yours? Because I've noticed, I saw in the papers today that someone's left one of the big banks that's coming over to join you guys.
Yeah. So
How do
I
you do
see
that?
you use that analogy. I sometimes use this description of, let's get the right athletes in the right seats, but we've got to have it. It's got to be a team, and we've got some exceptional talent at Westpac, and so it's been a real pleasure and delightful to see and elevate some of them and have them promoted, and you can see just outstanding performance. But there's definitely been a couple instances where we thought, you know what, it's probably appropriate just to bring in someone who can bring a little bit of more open-minded thinking or some different thinking into the team. And so that's why we have recruited a couple of external executives, and we will continue to always look at the talent internally and externally to make those decisions. But the number one rule or discipline I've been focused on is making sure that they will work as a team and they will fit in with the team, which is why having other executives help in the decision as to who we want to bring in and why is, in my mind, pretty important.
But in your game, do you have understood or agreed anti-poaching rules? Because how do you find these people, or do you meet them at a function, or do you
That's
say
a really good question.
this dude's good or that girl's great?
Yeah.
Let's go for her.
So look, a couple of things. I mean, obviously we have recruitment firms that help us, map the market. I do think it's in my responsibility as a leader and any leader of any bank, and I certainly see the leaders of Westpac, their job is to constantly understand the quality of the team they have, the quality of the talent out there in the marketplace, and to be constantly asking themselves, have I got the balance right? Are we delivering? And constantly testing and challenging as to whether it's working and working as it should, and making sure that the team's performing, and equally, have you got the right people in the right seats with the right ability and attitude to deliver? So therefore, that idea of finding talent is, if you will, probably my number one job description. Retaining and investing in people is probably really my number one job description. And then all the leaders in the bank have that same obligation, which is we've got to make sure we've got the best talent, we've got the best people in the best seats. And if I think about banking and where we are today, Mark, and you think about the world in which we operate, more and more it's going to be automated. More and more it's digital. 96% of what people do with Westpac is digital. And then you think about the regulator who says, I want you to be the same. I don't want you to have more risk appetite in one area versus another bank. They don't like that. And then you put something like AI over the top of it. And what you have is everything's becoming much more homogenized. And so it's being driven to be the same. And so, therefore, how are we going to be different? And how am I going to differentiate Westpac in the marketplace? And it's going to be back to the future. It's your people and how good they are. And more importantly, the discretionary effort they bring in every day and the way they feel trusted and empowered and supported. That's where we've got to go. And that's why I'm very focused on how I build a team and how that team then leads the company and how everyone in the company understands we've got your back. Because the way we're going to win is by having the best people with the best in work environment, giving us their best every day.
So, what is a win for you, Anthony? So, like in other words, who are your stakeholders? I mean, it's a broad sort of
Yeah.
group of stakeholders, but who are your stakeholders, and what is it that most of them are looking for? Are they looking for, the profit, the cash profit you're going to report? Are they looking for,
Yeah.
a share price? Or what are they looking for?
So,
And
so our goal is a number one, and I'll
number one in what regard?
number one, and so that's exactly right. It doesn't mean it's the largest, and what I'm looking for is that from a customer service proposition, everyone goes, gee, they're the number one, and we're not there at the moment. There's some pockets of the bank which are number one in customer metrics, etc., but we're not universally where we need to be, and so we're after that. So that's our goal. I don't think you can be number one unless you have the best employee proposition. So I want to be the place and I want to create an environment at Westpac. And we have a great environment, great people, but I want it to be the number one place that people want to work. So I want to create the number one employee proposition and people come to work. And if you've got the best people coming to work, giving their best every day, then that underwrites your ability to provide that, customer outcome that outcome that you want, which is number one with customer. If I get those two right, then I think what I do is I deliver the right return to shareholders, and that's that consistent, sustainable, growing return to shareholder in terms of dividend and obviously share price growth. And so that's the other element of what I think is number one. And we need to deliver better return on equity. We need to deliver better cost income ratio. Those are all, if you will, indicators. And if we can get those right, then I think that will, if you will, allow us to claim and be recognized as number one. Doesn't mean we're the largest. It doesn't also necessarily mean we're always the most profitable, but we are getting that balance right: customer, employee, and shareholder. And if I get that right, then we will be number one.
Do you see the regulator as a stakeholder? Because the
Absolutely.
regulator represents Australia.
Absolutely. And so,
Because we give you a license. When I say we, Australia has given you a license to take deposits and to be what they call an ADI or a bank,
yeah,
so to speak. The regulator is the policeman around this sort of stuff.
yeah.
Policemen also, but not that bad. As more, they do a lot of other things as well. Are they a stakeholder representing all of us?
I think that's right. I mean, I would, in the context of if I'm going to be number one in terms of customer service, I've got to meet a standard. I've got an obligation to the community and to the regulator in terms of how I deliver those services. So I feel it's entwined. If I'm going to be number one in that customer proposition that I'm providing, that I'm absolutely viewed by the regulator and by the community uh, in the same way, that I'm meeting those standards that I need to meet. Because you're absolutely right. You know, a license to operate a bank as a bank is a privilege, and we need to and do recognise it as such, and so therefore need to make sure in everything we do we meet the standards that the regulator stroke community expects of us.
So many, many years ago, and I think it was around about, my recollection was about 2001 or two. The very well known, and you'll remember him, a lot of people won't, but it was a very well known CEO of NAB. His name was Don Argus.
Yes.
And Don was asked, I think it was an interview for the AFR. They said to him, Don, whatever they said to him, what keeps you up at night? What keeps you awake at night? And his response was, a foreign entity who has the big balance sheet coming into Australia and either buying a bank or competing with a bank. And he quoted General Electric at the time. General Electric at the time was the world's largest company
Yeah.
by market cap. Was probably the biggest financier in the world in terms of asset finance. And it's not today, but it was then because the GFC sort of changed that. And interestingly enough, General Electric did come into Australia. If I asked Anthony Miller today, what's something that keeps you awake at night in terms of the banking sector, not just Westpac, but the banking sector. What is the biggest challenge to you today?
Oh, look, I mean, there's a couple of things. So if I could sort of have a bit of liberty to say
Yeah,
it's
go
more
for
than
it.
one thing. I think, one thing I'm very focused on, I think all the chief executives of the banks are, and chief executives right across Australia are, which is cyber and cyber crime, cyber security, data. It's just such a challenging environment. And we're not just, if you will, dealing with, say, criminals or, unfair business practices. We're dealing with nation states
Mm.
assaulting the country. And so that's a complexity and a challenge that I don't think previous CEOs of any era ever had to contemplate. And the challenges we face as we deal with cyber threats to the country are such that that does deeply worry me. The other aspect of I suppose what I do worry about is essentially banking is increasingly, as I described it, homogenized, commoditized. And so is it something that we could be further disintermediated by or impacted by as a large technology company looks to, via their phone, essentially say, just deal with me on everything and I will outsource and, if you will, have a white label offering, and I'll have a deposit over here and I'll get a bank, which will just be technically the deposit ADI
Mm.
institution, but you'll do it all via me and you'll do it all via my phone, for example.
Like Google,
That's right, Google and other
one of
other
those.
technology giants. Exactly right. And so, do they then, if you will, enter the financial services or the regulated, banking sector? I do, and I do worry about that. I do think other executives worry about that. I do also reflect on the fact that, however, if that's where they do go, then they will be captured by regulation that they're not captured by today, and they don't want that kind of regulation. And then that will be a very interesting proposition to put to people: is do you want these people providing banking services without necessarily the same responsibilities and
No oversight.
obligations? That's right. And then all of a sudden, being a regulated bank and being very good at how you deliver on your regulatory obligations to both regulator and community becomes not a burden, as it
An
isn't,
advantage.
but is part of your comparative
Mm.
advantage. And in fact, is something that we should be embracing and celebrating, because if we do that well, then that reinforces that license to operate and that right to operate, and reinforces our position in the marketplace.
You guys, the banking section, particularly the big five banks, including Macquarie, um, you're the biggest taxpayer in the country, probably, as a group. Definitely one of the most influential. Where do you see your banks or your bank group obligations relative to nation building and national policy in relation to things like, I don't know, super tax?
Yeah.
Do you feel as though you have a position, or do you think you feel as though you should get on the front foot about it as a bank? I'm talking about as an
Yeah, that's
institution.
that's a challenge for us. A question that we ask ourselves is, well, look, we're a big company and in big industry, and have a big role to play in the Australian community and economy. And we have a license to operate, and we need to be very fixated on, are we delivering the right standard of service to our customers, and are we meeting that community and regulatory expectation in doing that? And we've just got to make sure we're superb at that. And if we're superb at that, then I think we've earned the right to be able to contribute to the public discourse around particular things like tax, maybe industrial relations, maybe policy settings, etc. But I think we've got to make sure we're very, very good on delivering that service to the standard our customers want and the community expects, if we're going to contribute to these discussions. And I would say that perhaps you could, over the last 10 years, there's been a period of time where the banks haven't been at the standard needed to, and Royal Commission and other things revealed that. But I do think we perhaps, particularly with COVID and what's happened in the last few years, hopefully people do feel banks are working better, working harder to deliver customer service to the right standards community expects. And so therefore we can and should contribute a little bit more. to some of these bigger topics and bigger discussions. But we've got to be a little bit honest with ourselves, Mark. Until we've got that standard, or got ourselves to that standard consistently, we've got to be careful.
The glass houses argument.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
And we've just got to be a little bit humble about how we put ourselves forward into these kind of debates. I do think, for example, Westpac is Australia's oldest company. First
Bank of New South
company,
Wales.
first and oldest bank. And the fact is that our success has been tied to the growth and progress of this country. And so we have a heavy responsibility to contribute to Australia's growth and support Australia. And one of the things I would sort of say that we've done is we've committed to retaining our businesses in Papua New Guinea and Fiji, because that's part of what is important to Australia's national interests as we go forward. And we've therefore got a great working relationship with Canberra in making sure how we do things and what we want to do in PNG and Fiji is something that they're comfortable with and is serving the national interest as we go forward. And I think that's been, to me, and I think that I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of the Westpac doing that. And that's an example of the kind of things we know we need to do more of in helping Australia. Because if Australia prospers, then being a bank with the market share we have, we naturally prosper as a result. And so thinking much more nationwide is sort of also part of my job description now.
Two more quick questions. The first one is cryptocurrency and or all the usual players in relation to cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, etc., Ethereum. What's the bank's position in relation to that?
So the underlying technology, we're continuously working with our peer banks, international and domestic, the Reserve Bank, on how we might use that technology, particularly in the context of international payments, for example, and tokenization of deposits and assets. All of a sudden could reduce a lot of friction
and quicker.
Could make it all quicker and more efficient.
Yeah. As in blockchain, you're talking about the blockchain.
What we've got to be careful of is, as things go faster and more efficiently, frauds and other matters are affected more effectively and efficiently. And so we've got to make sure that, as we go further with this, that we are still retaining certain protections that, community and customers expect of us. In the context of cryptocurrency itself, we continue to see an enormous amount of fraud and scam activity
and crime
in relation around cryptocurrency. And so we are conservative in terms of facilitating payments into crypto exchanges and payments out of crypto exchanges using the Australian, the Westpac banking system. And I think that's a statement probably applies to all of the Australian banks, because there is just such a high propensity for fraud, scam, and criminal activity that we're very cautious about that. And so until that is addressed, it's hard to see how we just go and embrace that asset class in a way that some of the users of it are advocating we should go. And one of the other interesting things for me is this interesting and emerging challenge for the United States, which is it's embracing, on the one hand, Bitcoin and crypto, but the US's preeminence in the world is one of the reasons for that is its US dollar. And the US dollar is the currency that everyone goes to and goes between as they do their international trade or, if you will, complete transactions. So why would you jeopardize that by encouraging something such as a Bitcoin as an alternative, where there is no ability to truly monitor, trace, and, if you will, govern? And that would only start to weaken US position globally. And so I'm finding that a little bit of an interesting development, which is, US hegemony is at risk if you allow Bitcoin the full run, or the cryptocurrency universe to have the full run of international payments, etc. So how do we get that balance right? That's, to me, a little bit unclear. And it also means, let's be thoughtful about where we go with crypto. That's right.
So basically, your position, let it play out and see what happens.
It's one of those areas where I don't think you have to be first. You just got to be right.
Yeah.
And so let's be right.
So final question, more of a commentary. I noticed when we're doing the work on this podcast, two books you've read. I mean, I'm sure you've read many books, but two books you read. One is called Why Nations Fail, and the other one is called The Count of Monte Cristo. But I just want to look at Why Nations Fail. That book. That book was actually quite an interesting book, and I remember it as well. But it was sort of proffering a position that nations that fail are the ones that sort of only look after the elite and lock out everyone having an opportunity, a fair opportunity to innovate through innovation to become better at what they do.
Yeah.
Is that a book? Does that book sort of somehow describe how Anthony Miller feels and thinks about how things should happen in the world?
Yeah. Look, it is a book. I've read it a couple of times and have reflected on it. Certainly, the nation's failing because essentially the gap between the have and have-nots
Yeah,
gets too far. But more importantly, the have-nots don't think they have any hope, don't think they have any opportunity. And so that's a really critical exam challenge for society today.
and we
And
have that with young people
that's
who
right.
feel that relative to people, say my age, the boomers.
That's right. And then in particular, perhaps the example that most brings this out, which is housing and access
Mm.
to housing. And so, you know, I own my house, and everyone of my age and generation, we all got opportunities and we have bought property. And I think we've enjoyed the wealth effect of house and house prices growing. But we're currently not building enough or creating enough house or unit supply so that everyone feels they're a chance of getting it. Doesn't mean you guarantee that they get it, but they've got to feel like there's hope that they'll get it. And so one of the things that I drew out of the Why Nations Fail is that unless we are working much harder at ensuring those who don't have property, as an example, feel there's at least hope and there's things in place that give them a chance of getting access to property, then that's a real problem, and we've got to solve that. And those who have property and those who are, if you will, in the incumbent position that many of us are today, we have a bit of a responsibility to say, well, what else can we do now? What should we be doing to ensure that others have the same opportunities we had, albeit circumstances different and the environment's different, but we've got to give them the same opportunities, the same hope that we all had that drove our behaviours to buy and obviously enjoy owning property.
And the reason I asked you that is because, and to some extent, I've sort of set you up a little bit, but then
Yeah.
I apologise for that. But
Yeah.
it goes back to my earlier question about banks having a say on policy, because
Yeah.
um, um, if I just use young people, anyone under the age of 30, who's looking at, and by the way, I'm going to sound like a heretic saying this, but would be thinking to themselves, like, I can't afford to go and bid against Anthony Miller because Anthony Miller's got,
Yeah.
maybe you're not the boss of Westpac, you're just a school teacher, headmaster at a school, but you've accumulated two properties.
Yeah.
Your income from the two properties now is being added to your other income from your wage, and given negative gearing, Anthony Miller might get approved for more money to buy the property against one of my young producers. He's only 22, and Anthony Miller's going to use negative gearing to build up more of a portfolio. And by the way, I'm not against negative gearing. I think it's a great thing. It's been great for Australia.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this summit that's being held, the productivity summit, they're going to address tax reform. And as I said, I'm going to sound like a heretic, but to some extent, wealth has been created in this country by using sort of tax concessions that really only benefit blokes like you and me today, and women like you and I, like people in our position. And it is largely unfair for the younger people because whilst they can use negative gearing, they actually don't ever qualify for a loan. And we're always going to be able to outbid them because of negative gearing.
Yeah.
We're going to be able to say, and I want that property, and my income's better than yours, Mr. 21-year-old. Therefore, I can always outbid you, and as a result of outbidding you, you'll never get onto the ladder. I don't think we can solve more housing. I mean, it seems like an issue we can't solve. And we saw something coming out of Treasury, which is leaked somehow, to saying that Treasury has already advised the government that they will not meet their 1.2 million housing guide, the new houses. So if we can't solve the housing issue, affordability issue for younger people, and younger people are a big cohort in your business. I mean, they're very important to you because they're the next generation.
Yeah.
We're all going to die off at some stage. You've got to fill the bucket back up with younger people, and you've got to attract younger people, which is takes me back to the question I asked you before. And given, your, Why Nations Fail book, it's because institutions, governments, I'm talking about, are not restructuring or changing the structure of the system to allow people to get back on the ladder. Younger
Yeah.
people.
So,
Where do you think?
so
Where do you think
I
you
come back to
stand?
that idea that people need to feel like they have an opportunity, that there's hope. I do think we have not done anywhere near what we should be doing to create more supply in the context of housing. And so when you talk about there's a lot of us within this element of incumbency that can therefore just keep buying and thus squeezing out those who don't, you certainly can try to temper that demand by limiting how many properties you might own. And obviously that just creates a cottage industry of arbitrage, etc. And what we've done and continue to perhaps put too much weight on is how do we solve the demand side in Australia? So why don't we lend more money or give more money to first home buyers or cap
A
interest rates,
grant
etc.
and
And they're all good things and we should do all of those things. But what we've got to do is solve supply. And if I just keep the simple sort of proposition in front of us, which is supply at the right price point, so that all those people who can't at the moment buy property can see there is an opportunity or potential opportunity and they have hope. We've got to create that. And so if I think about the median income in Australia is about $90,000. As a bank, you would lend probably 5 times someone's income, subject to expense verification, maybe 6 times, subject to expense verification against their income, a mortgage. So therefore, that tells you we need a lot of houses in that sort of $500 to $600,000 zip code if we're going to solve what is currently available in terms of financing and
sort of matching the two.
that's right. And so then you break it down and say, okay, we need more $500 to $600,000 houses. And so median house prices in Australia are over $1 million. They're $1.6 million in Sydney. Regional Australia's median house price is $500,000. So if we're going to go after house price, houses, units at the right price point, why aren't we thinking a lot more about how we create more opportunity in regional Australia, just given the price point there meets so much more of what we need to solve? Second thing is that maybe we have to continue to work harder at densifying and providing a lot more properties in the city rather than the big home, which obviously costs an amount and will, because of costs and because of a whole host of other issues, are more expensive than $500,000 to $600,000. How do we create a lot more $500,000 to $600,000 properties? And we're not putting that exam question in front of everyone in the property ecosystem to deliver. And I think if we then said, let's go after that, you'd be surprised at what could be achieved if that's the goal. And more importantly, we say to every single council, your job is to make sure that there's 50 new units or houses at the price point of $500,000,
Affordable housing.
$600,000. Yeah, and but not affordable in the sense of, a slightly pejorative, it's a
Yeah,
low
yeah.
socio-demographic.
Yeah.
No, this is just price of property at the right price point to meet a demand that at the moment is not being
Do you think
met.
the word affordable is probably the wrong word to use? Because
Yeah,
it is pejorative. It
yeah.
sort of sounds like, and to developers
Or some
going,
people will feel like, it's a little bit sort of
yeah,
patronizing,
yeah, yeah.
affordable housing. No. We've just got to get more property at the right price point for people who can pay that
It's
price.
a better narrative, a
Yeah,
much better narrative. Because the people who are buying it don't want to be thinking they're buying
that's
affordable
exactly
housing. They want to
right.
think, I
Yeah,
bought the price because that's the price I can
yeah,
afford. It might be a bit smaller,
yeah,
might have, slightly one bathroom, but it might be just slightly different to
yeah.
be affordable from the developer's point of view. But that sort of makes sense. And I think the change in the narrative is really important. And the industry more than better than anybody. You know who you will
Look,
lend to as a group.
we've certainly got good insights on the industry. I wouldn't say we
Absolutely.
know better than anyone, but we've got good insights on the industry, and we're very keen to support the industry and the job creation, the nation building opportunities. If you
Nation
say
building.
let's put more into regional Australia, and then you think about regional Australia, Northern Australia,
Mm.
we need a lot more of our population living in Northern Australia for a whole host of reasons. Not the least of which is it's a reasonably elegant potential way to deal with cost of housing at the right price point for the demand that we have. The only other thing I'd say about that book, which I thought was really important, was, and you drew on it in some of your observations that when you read the book, is about the power of having innovation and the way private property or intellectual property laws and protecting people who come up with great ideas and giving and thus stimulating and challenging people to innovate and come up with new things. And that's one of those things which, we should continue to ask ourselves: are we doing enough? And I think we have great intellectual property protections in Australia, but are we creating enough of an environment and enough room for people to try things, create things, trial and error? Because we've got to innovate and we've got to be really open-minded and courageous about trying things if we're going to, I suppose, succeed as a nation. And if there's one thing you sort of could argue the US has as an advantage over everyone else in the
Mm.
world is they believe every day that there's a chance to get ahead. They believe in the American dream, and they believe in the idea that they can innovate and they can create, and obviously the technology industry and what the innovation and the ambition they have is extraordinary, and that is underpins so much of the success of the United States. We need to encourage that a lot more in Australia, in my view, and create a lot more context where people feel inspired to go and to try and experiment. And one of the issues in Australia is sometimes I think we're a bit tough on each other, hiding behind that idea of the tall poppy syndrome, where we drag people down for trying. I think we've got to start to really endorse and celebrate and get behind people who are trying things and create a much more positive culture around that.
Anthony, well, that's actually pretty cool that you actually said that, because innovation and the innovation nation, which is what Malcolm Turnbull tried to turn Australia into when he was the Prime Minister here, is probably my biggest bugbear. I think we've lost a little bit of that, and not that we're without talent. I mean,
I think we've got enormous talent.
amazing amount
Let's
of
just
talent.
liberate that talent and give it every run of the place.
Well, mate, thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
No,
Thanks.
thank you. That's very gracious to host me. So thank you.
Very gracious. I'm actually privileged to have a CEO of your ilk into the organisation.
No,
So
thanks.
thanks very
That's
much, mate.
nice you say that.